I know you're out there. I know that you're afraid. You're afraid of us. You're afraid of change. I don't know the future. I didn't come here to tell you how this is going to end. I came here to tell you how it's going to begin. I'm going to hang up this phone, and then I'm going to show these people what you don't want them to see. A world without rules and controls, without borders or boundaries. A world where anything is possible. Where we go from there is a choice I leave to you.
The KRISANNE Hall Show.
Any varmint that crosses that lady's path has met its match. Come on!
Rise and shine, liberty-loving patriots. Welcome to the KRISANNE Hall Show. KRISANNE Hall here, KRISANNEHALL.com. So glad to be here, happy to be here. I have a funny story to share with you this morning, something that I think we should start the day off with since it may get a little bit serious here today. I got a chance to go to the Boston Tea Party Museum yesterday, and I want to share a little bit of that experience with you. But before that, I want to share with you an article from Hot Air that totally made my day. Apparently, this month, Arby's introduced a tempting new bacon product to the already generously bacon-infused fast food market called brown sugar bacon. Arby's was true to its slogan, "We have the meats." But not everybody is excited about Arby's meats. And as a matter of fact, the vegetarians have voiced their discontent with Arby's meats menu and sent emails, tweets, phone calls, etc. to Arby's, outraged by their meat selection. I just want that to sink in for a little bit, because this is a society that we now live in. You can force people to sell or not sell things to whomever or however you choose. And you can be absolutely offended by absolutely anything that someone is doing. You can be offended by the fact that Arby's, a fast food restaurant who makes its money off of meat-style sandwiches, you can be offended that they sell meat. Not only that, you can be offended that they do that and then expect that they will change their menu for you. This is a mental disorder, okay? This is just unexplainable. I really think this is the mentality of a 2-year-old. This is something that we would call arrested development, a spoiled mentality that says you can have whatever you want as long as you throw yourself on the floor and display in some outrageous manner some ridiculously juvenile temper tantrum. And this is the mentality that we have fostered in America. These irresponsible, juvenile adults who think they can have their way whenever they want. And all they have to do is scream, "I am offended." This is absolutely ridiculous. Now, there are places in America where somebody would change their slogan or change their PR campaign based on these imbecilic, juvenile temper tantrums, which anyone who has ever had a 2-year-old knows is the worst thing you can do. See, this is what we have done. We have allowed the temper tantrums to receive their achieved results. Give these somehow socially deficient, psychologically arrested people their way. And all that does is encourage the temper tantrums. Anybody who's ever had a 2-year-old knows that. The best way to stop a temper tantrum is to simply ignore it. I remember my son having a temper tantrum one time in, I don't remember, some public place. I mean, just threw himself on the floor. And I walked away and let him have his temper tantrum right there on the floor. Now, I walked around the corner and watched him, but he could not see me. And he realized very quickly that there was no one there to garner his attention, and quickly became concerned that there was no one there to garner his attention, which immediately stopped the behavior, flipped it over to a concern of, oh my goodness, where is mommy? And it didn't take long before that behavior did not happen again. Because you cannot give 2-year-olds attention when they have temper tantrums and expect them to learn not to have temper tantrums. And so that's the way we need to be behaving here in society. When these juvenile arrested mental development, social development part of our society have their temper tantrums about flags, have their temper tantrums about bacon, have their temper tantrums about, oh, I don't know, whatever the offense is today, you simply ignore them and go about your business. Now, Arby's sort of did that, sort of ignored them, but then had a little fun with it. And I think because these people are actually adults, this might be the better way of dealing with it. Show them just how ridiculous they sound as you ignore their complaints. So I want to read to you the letter that Arby's published for their dear vegetarian dissenters. Here it was published on July 7th, 2015 through PR Newswire. Dear vegetarians, we respect you. We respect your life decisions. With that in mind, we wanted to be abundantly clear that this letter is not meant to sway or convert you. We are sharing this to offer our support. Nearly a year ago, we embarked on a journey to tell America about our meats. By now, you've likely heard the Arby's tagline, "We have the meats." It's tough to hear, but it is what it is. We have many meats, and we have quality meats. It's understandable that you disapprove of our meat bravado. Your voices have been heard. Your letters, your emails, your voicemails, your tweets, your Facebook comments. We hear you. We love our meats, but we realize they're not for everyone. Then, on Sunday, June 28th, we launched a meat innovation that has likely tempted you. Brown sugar bacon. It's our pepper bacon, glazed in restaurant with brown sugar and then cooked to perfection. It may be hard to resist, even for you. Hardcore vegetarians likely won't budge, but for those of you who are on the fringe or new to the game, avoidance can't be easy. We at Arby's have created this temptation, so we'd like to help. We're giving you a number to call, 1-855-MEAT-HELP. This is a vegetarian support hotline. When your nose betrays you and alerts the rest of your senses to find and devour this sweet meat, please call 1-855-MEAT-HELP. And the help is HLP. I wonder if anybody's called that number. Anyway, you will receive the support you need to resist this gateway meat and get... I'm sorry, gateway meat. I had to stop there and laugh. This gateway meat and get tips on how to avoid temptation. Delicious, sizzling temptation. Be strong. We're here for you. Sincerely, Arby's. Man, I tell you what, I that is absolutely brilliant. I want to shake that marketing manager's hand and just simply say that was brilliant. And that's the way Americans should be responding when people are offended by what we're doing. You see, the beauty of being America is that you get to be offended. And the beauty of being in America is that I get to offend you. That's what liberty is all about. If my offense is not causing you physical harm or death, you see, my eating of Arby's bacon, which I will do, by the way, I am a huge bacon fan. I am actually known for going into a restaurant and ordering a meat sandwich and then, dun 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 dun, adding bacon. Wow. So I will probably actually partake of the bacon sandwich at some point in time in my life, and I will enjoy it. And if I have the opportunity, I may just go find a PETA Foundation headquarters, sit outside on a park bench, and eat it right there. Because guess what? I live in America. And you have the right to be offended. But I have the right to be offensive. You don't need to change my diet, and you don't need to change the way I think. We can do that through rational, reasonable discussion. Now, unfortunately, for those in the temper tantrum mentality, rational, reasonable discussion is impossible. I know. I've attempted to have it with you on Facebook, Twitter, emails, and other forms of social media. It's not possible. I have even tried to have discussions with liberals on political issues. Oh my goodness, where they say, I want you to show me the facts. And then I actually show them the facts, and then they say, well, I don't have time to read what you've sent to me. I do not want to spend an entire day having a political debate. Well, I'm so sorry you're happy in your ignorance, but I can't help you then. Time to man up, America, just like Arby's.
KRISANNE Hall Show. She's Liberty's lobbyist.
So I went to the Boston Tea Party Museum yesterday, and I want to tell you, I was a little nervous about going because I know that historical revision has infested so much of our society. And as a matter of fact, when I went to Washington, D.C., and went to see the Declaration of Independence and the Magna Carta that they had on display and all of this stuff, my head wanted to explode. The little cards that they have in Washington, D.C. describing those documents were nothing short of propaganda. Propaganda, pro-government, anti-independence, anti-truth propaganda. And being the teacher of this truth, I found it incredibly offensive. Maybe I should go on a Twitter rage and see, that would be something that would be worth a real offense. The distortion, manipulation of truth in order to dumb down America, turning them into subjects and slaves. And so I was a little nervous about going to the Boston Tea Party Museum. And they do it's a whole sort of theatrical presentation. So everybody that you see is dressed in proper timepiece attire. And they try to speak in, something close but not outlandishly proper dialect, and it's a very interesting thing. Now, the first lady that came out, her name was Sally, and she was very enthusiastic, very entertaining, but she started off with the common misconception that the Boston Tea Party was about tea. And so I got a little bit nervous. But it didn't take long for the presentation to actually turn to truth. And I was very excited about that because I think maybe they were just trying to approach people on their common understanding and then bring in the truth afterwards. Because, you can't overturn decades of dumbed down education and improper education in a matter of 3 minutes. And so I really appreciate the way they sort of opened the door to this new information for everybody to soften the blow for them. Sam Adams came in and gave an amazing presentation that was just simply entertaining truth. Very, very shallow, but still truth, which they're not there to teach what KRISANNE Hall teaches, and I respect that, but it was a very good presentation, and I want to tell you, if you have the chance to go to the Boston Tea Party Museum, you need to do this. This is something that you need to do. And I want to mention to you that, God broke my heart for our founders. And so it is not unusual for me to be literally, emotionally touched when I teach or when I talk about the things that our founders did for us. And so we have to give me a little pass on this. By the end of the presentation, they had this beautiful video on the founding of our revolution, beginning with the Boston Tea Party and ending with Concord and Lexington. And I'm crying. I'm crying. There are tears just flowing down my face. And I want to mention, too, the only thing that kept me from openly sobbing was my pride. I didn't see anybody else in the room crying, and I didn't want people to think, wow, she's a freak. Is that terrible? But look, this stuff gets me in my heart. People who loved liberty so much and loved us so much that they were willing to die to secure both. How can you not be touched over something like that? What greater love does any man have than to give his life for his neighbor or his brother? That's what these people did for us. And it breaks my heart knowing what they sacrificed. And looking around and seeing us living the very things they sacrificed so much to prevent.
So don't let them steal your light. Don't let them break your stride. There is light on the other side. You'll see all the raindrops falling me. It's a revolution.
The KRISANNE Hall Show. She's Liberty's lobbyist.
So in honor of what our framers did for us, I'd like to share some truth to dispel the distortions, the half-truths that are completed. You see, what upset our framers brought us to the point of picking up arms against our own government. Yes, the battle between America and Great Britain was not taxes. Was not America and Great Britain, by the way. It was British people in a civil war against their own country. It was not taxed enough already. I know that's very clever, spells out T, but it was not about taxes. If you want to spell out T, how about tyrannized enough already? They were maxed out on their tolerance to tyranny. And the taxation that the founders could no longer take was that they were taxed out on tyranny. The origin of the Tea Party was not about money. And the driving force towards American independence was not taxation. It was everything else. Legislation without representation. The colonists were getting no legislation in Parliament, and Parliament didn't care. They mocked them. They scorned them. And they continued to create representation that only applied to them, but never gave them any voice. You see, the laws that were being passed by Parliament were not going to be applied on Parliament. So the men who made the laws were exempt from those laws. And so the colonists began to revolt and boycott the taxed items. Linen, lumber, sugar, tea, paper, and ink. Many things. Let me tell you something. Samuel Adams explained this arbitrary taxation on May 15, 1764, the Boston Record Commissioner's Report. Now, this is a part of some of the publications of the Committees of Correspondence. I knew the word would come to me very shortly. The Committees of Correspondence were the birth of the Tea Party. This is not the tea that went in the harbor, was not the birth of the Tea Party. The birth of the Tea Party was the Committees of Correspondence that were created in the courtroom of James Otis Jr. James Otis Jr. arguing against warrantless searches before a packed-out courtroom, saying that the warrantless searches conducted on the people were the most arbitrary and despotic things that government could ever do. Dr. James Warren, Mr. Samuel Adams, both in that courtroom that day, left so supercharged that they created the Committees of Correspondence. And in the beginning of those publications, Samuel Adams and the Committees of Correspondence, their purpose was to educate each other on the tyrannical nature of our government and what we need to do to turn our British propaganda into truth. The British propaganda that these people were lying, that taxes were paying their fair share, that they were a bunch of seditionists who were greedy and didn't want to support each other as a kingdom ought. You see, taxes being your fair share is not something that our government invented. It is the lie of oppressive governments for centuries, and then pointing out that people who object to the abusive and oppressive nature of out-of-control taxation or simply don't want to pay their fair share is not new either. That was the argument against our framers. Listen to what Sam Adams says. Arbitrary taxation makes slaves out of free people. For if our trade may be taxed, why not our land? Why not the produce of our lands and everything we possess or make use of? I want you to get this in a proper perspective. Samuel Adams is saying that it's outrageous that they tax our wages. But even more outrageous than taxing our wages would be to tax our land. And even more outrageous than taxing our wages and taxing our land would be taxing the produce of our lands. And even more outrageous than that, taxing everything we possess or make use of. I want to just put that in proper perspective so you see exactly where we are. He's outraged by the taxation of our property. And it is absolutely unheard of to our framers that they would tax produce of the produce of the lands and everything that we possess or make use of. Samuel Adams says, this we apprehend annihilates our charter right to govern and tax ourselves. It strikes at our British privilege, which, as we have never forfeited them, we hold in common with our fellow subjects who are natives of Britain. If taxes are laid upon us in any shape, without our having a legal representation when they are laid? Are we not reduced from the charter of free subjects to the miserable state of tributary slaves? He's saying when the federal government can tax you, tax your land, tax everything on your land, tax your wages, tax everything that you use and possess. When the federal government can do that, they are reducing you to a state of tributary slaves. See, Sam Adams saw the big picture. He knew that if the federal government assumed the power to lay taxes contrary to the common rights of the colonists without giving the people any voice, there would be no limit to the power of this government. When was the last time you had a voice in Washington, D.C.? When was the last time our legislators in Washington, D.C. actually created a law that applied to them as well? Well, they had this brilliant idea in our colonial days. After the passage of the Declaratory Act, in which Parliament said that they could tax people, or they could create any law whatsoever to bind the colonists with no limitation whatsoever, which is a violation of their constitutional contracts. Government was limited, even as a monarchy, for our colonists. It was called a limited monarchy, actually. And after the Declaratory Act, they got this brilliant idea to collect their taxes, that they would mandate that the colonists purchase the taxed items so they couldn't get around it. And we are now living in the age of mandated purchases, just like they did. Our current government feels it can force citizens to purchase health care based entirely upon the condition of being alive. If government is granted such a power over the people, ignoring the voice of the people and denying their proper representation, then where are the limits to this power? Samuel Adams said in 1772, among the natural rights of the colonists are these: first, a right to life; secondly, to liberty; thirdly, to property, together with the right to support and defend them in the best manner they can. These are evident branches of, rather than deductions from, the duty of self-preservation, commonly called the first law of nature. The first law of nature is that you have the right to property. Taxation removes that right to property. When the government can tax your property, you don't own it. You simply possess it as long as you pay the government rent. Check it out. You fail to pay your property taxes for 3 years, and your property is repossessed by the government. That shows you who owns your property. You leave your property as an inheritance to your children, and your children don't pay the inheritance tax on that property, and see who gets your property. I want you to realize that we are not so different from them. Yet we feel ourselves different from them. We're somehow above the sacrifice necessary to secure the property for our children. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal stations to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind require that they should declare the causes which impel them to separation. And they did in the Declaration of Independence. And it was not money. It was the king controlling the entire government. It was the people having no representation, eating away at the separation of powers, coercing Parliament into submission, creating a government ruled solely by the whim of the king, and overwhelming power of Parliament with no representation. How does this compare to this government that we see today? How about this in the Declaration of Independence? He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasion on the rights of the people, for suspending our own legislature and declaring themselves invested with the power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. America now has a Congress that's unwilling to fulfill their solemn oath to stop our current kingly administration from taking legislative power. Instead, we are subjected to the empty words and political gamesmanship from our House and our Senate, reduced to grovel before the President and beg him to stop stealing legislative power. The problem is our Congress has never stood with manly firmness, but this kingly administration has dissolved their power through their own cowardice and forced them into compliance through their own negligence. I will write law when the legislators refuse to write law. I will legislate where they refuse to regulate, declaring our Congress irrelevant and impotent, and then when they turn around and act like it as they have, then they really are. We have a king who refuses to protect the people. The same grievance in 1776. He has refused for a long time, after such dissolutions, to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned the people at large for their excuse, the states remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions from within. I'm just trying to show you there's a cause to be fought for.
The weapon of my choice, don't censor my voice. Hate me if you won't, or love me if you can. If the truth is what you want, then you found your man. I ain't backing down, I ain't backing up. If you think like I think, then crack it on up. I won't back up, I don't back down. I've been raised up to stand my ground. Take my job, but not my guns. Tax my check till I ain't got none, except for the good Lord up above. I answer to no one.
The KRISANNE Hall Show. She's Liberty's lobbyist.
We're looking at these grievances from the Declaration of Independence and trying to realize where we are historically, because history always repeats. We have now these. You have to get to the 17th grievance before you get to anything about taxes. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. America has a Congress who will not respond to the king's veiled threats and open chastisements of the Supreme Court. Complete and utter disregard for what the courts say when they're trying to limit him. But when the courts do something that is completely unconstitutional and completely outside the realm of constitutional power, then we're okay. We're all right with that. And Congress does nothing. Do you know our Congress could stop this right now? Could stop this right now. Under Article 1, Section 7, they could end every abomination of exercise of power by the President of the United States. And now we're getting to my favorite grievance. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. We have a Congress who is unwilling to rein in executive regulatory agencies. How many new regulatory agencies, czars, and regulations must we suffer before Congress will act? What about the regulations and government intrusions by these arms of the king that are literally harassing our people and eating out their substance? Do we just dismiss the raids on the farms and the co-ops over raw milk? Do we forget that Abner Schoenwetter spent 6 years in prison after a regulatory agency prosecuted him for violating an unconstitutional foreign law? Do we allow the EPA to override the Bill of Rights and enforce their own law upon the people without due process, as they do to the residents of Bonner County, Idaho, among others? Do we allow our government to consistently engage in denying us our right to a trial by jury? Through the Patriot Act, through NDAA, through the Federal Buildings and Grounds Improvement Act. Do we continue to allow the federalization of our police, just as the king did in 76? He's affected to render the military independent of and superior to civil power by turning our local governments into military power. We have no longer control over them. And then they said, in every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned the king for our redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Hey, I want you to understand something. The federal government has raked in, are you ready for this? Let's see, millions, billions, trillions. Okay, we got the numbers right. $2.5 trillion in taxes in the first 9 months for 2015. Taxation. Our federal government has raked in $2.4 trillion in the first 9 months. Do you know what that equates to? $16,451 for every single person in the country who has either a full-time or part-time job in June. That is crazy. That is up from last year. And we are okay with that. How do they get $2.4 trillion? By taxing everything that we have without giving us any representation in Congress. Without having any control over the way our money is spent. That's how you have representation. You control how your money is spent. Look what George Washington said. I think the Parliament of Great Britain hath no more right to put their hands into my pocket without my consent than I have to put my hand into yours for money. And this being already urged to them in a firm but decent manner by all the colonies, what reason is there to expect anything from their injustice? We need to stop allowing the government to stick their hands in our pocket and then spend it however they want. It's time for us to stand for liberty like our framers did. God bless. See you tomorrow.